I remember at 8 years old having this deciding moment where I was like, it's not fair that my family are struggling so much and I have to do something about it. That's when I signed my childhood away. So in order for me to shift, I had to realize that decision was leading me to break down. I needed to retrain other people in terms of how to deal with me. That was a turning point for me in terms of, okay, what are the decisions that I'm making that are draining me there's so much to the point that I don't want to live. It's not sustainable, clearly. And I'm scared that if I talk, I'm going to cry and not stop crying. And I'm like, you have pressure. So maybe the crying is going to release the pressure. And 2 weeks before she died, she said, okay, I'm ready. And it was too late. Unfortunately, I have found that most firstborn daughters need to crash before they're open to receiving something else.
Welcome to another episode of the Self-Care Oasis podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Gregory, Self-Care Alchemist, and I help women transform burnout into better boundaries, more balance, and shameless bliss. So I'm happy to welcome my guest today, Adaku Mbagwu. She is here because this is going to be an amazing conversation. We're going to be talking about eldest daughter, self-care. Welcome, Adaku. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us who you are, what you're doing in the world, and how you're making a difference.
Thank you for having me. My name's Adaku Mbagwu. I live in Tulum, Mexico, even though I'm probably going to leave next year. I guess I'm a firstborn daughter specialist. I've launched a community for firstborn daughters. I'm a firstborn daughter myself, the second eldest of 7 children. I have an oldest brother. I help firstborn daughters who are executives and entrepreneurs heal the traumas and limitations that have come from being the firstborn so that they can achieve more success with more peace, groundedness, balance, and healthier relationships.
Oh my gosh, yes. So, eldest daughter specialist. Me being an eldest daughter, there's a certain dynamic around having that title. There's a lot of responsibility, what a lot of people are now recognizing as trauma. But I just want to get into how you have been, like your work as a eldest daughter specialist, but first, just as your own experience as an eldest daughter and how that has impacted your life and the work that you're doing now.
Oh, wow, that's a big question. And do I keep it brief or do I give you the details?
You
So
can
many.
keep the details, all the juicy details you'd like, because I know there are a lot of eldest daughters out there who just sometimes feel isolated and alone. And it's like, oh, you're just being dramatic. Oh, you're just being too much. It wasn't that bad, but we have a different perspective.
We
And
definitely do. Okay, so for sure, we are not alone in this, but I will happily share my experience. I was born in Nigeria, a second child to my mom, but the firstborn daughter. Apparently, everyone doted on me. I was too young to remember. We moved to London when I was 6 years old. I think we just went from one extreme to another. In Nigeria, my mum was a kept woman. My dad was a really successful businessman. She had community around her, family living with her, all the things. And then when we moved to London, she was by herself with 3 of us, my little sister and my older brother, and she was pregnant with my other little sister. So she went from having abundance in every way to being on her own, 3 children, 4 on the way, and things kind of just didn't go well. She was a supply teacher and she would work sometimes, and when there was money it was great. When there wasn't, she would supplement on credit cards. Eventually that caught up on her. So a lot of my childhood memories was hearing bailiffs at the door, banging the door, breaking in, taking all of our furniture. We didn't really grow up with anything. We had an apartment, but it was a shell of a home. We made it a home, but there was no furniture. We didn't have toys. There was no gas and electricity for months on end. There was no food sometimes for days. And I remember at 8 years old having this deciding moment where I was like, it's not fair that my family are struggling so much and I have to do something about it. That's when I signed my childhood away. My mom got remarried. Her husband became schizophrenic. She felt like that was her punishment for leaving my dad. So her attention went to him. And I took on this role as the mom. I was braiding my sister's hair. I was doing their homework with them. I was cleaning the house. I was cooking food at 8, 9 years old. On top of that, I was kind of hustling in anywhere I could. I would braid hair of my sister's friends and get paid a little bit of money and use that to buy gas and electricity or food, whatever was needed, and would also babysit sometimes kids that were older than me. So that's how I stepped into this parentified role from a really young age. It followed me all of my life. I worked 40 hours a week while I was at university to send money home to my mom. When I graduated, even though I was engaged to get married, unfortunately for my fiance, he got roped into this responsibility of taking care of our household as well as my mom's household. And the pressure of that kind of broke me in my mid 20s, where I felt like, hold on, I'm trying to carry all of these things. I'm working 12 hours a day at my job. No one ever checks in, like, am I okay? Everyone just takes, and expects me to keep giving more. And I'm like, where am I supposed to give more? I have nothing left. And I started feeling unappreciated, started feeling invisible, started feeling like I didn't matter. I felt very isolated, and I kind of felt like no one understood. And even when I tried to communicate it, like you said, it was just kind of like, why are you moaning? And I'm just like, I'm exhausted, like more than exhausted to my bones, to my core. I don't even want to do this anymore. So at the age of 25, everything culminated into a breakdown. I ended my engagement 4 months before our wedding. I got an ultimatum for a recruitment business I was working for, where I was the partner, to either keep my opinions to myself or leave. I chose the latter. So then I ended up being homeless, jobless, moving into my mum's house. And at that point, we were at loggerheads because I resented her for not having a childhood and was trying to get her to acknowledge and apologize, which I was failing miserably. I'm sure a lot of firstborn daughters will be able to relate to that. And all of those circumstances happening at the same time led me to a breakdown, fell into depression, which was hard to accept because I didn't think I was a candidate for depression because I'm so strong. So it definitely humbled me, but I couldn't figure out the solution to it. And I thought, okay, if this is the rest of my life, I don't want to live. I had 2 failed suicide attempts. And that's when my journey started. So I think depression and the suicide attempt was my breaking point that I needed. It was my rock bottom that was like, okay, I thought I had things under control. I thought I was the family manager and everything was staying up because of me. But if I'm breaking down, clearly I don't have all the answers. And that allowed me to open up to start doing the work. And after doing the work on myself, which led to a lot of results that we can go into, I got to a point where I was like, oh my gosh, I can help other women and other firstborn daughters heal in the way that I've healed and achieve similar results that I've achieved.
Wow. So many parallels, my God. But to be so young and to get to that point, I think this is just my opinion because my journey took me a longer time to get there to the breakdown point and to even the recognition that was the problem. One of like the root of a lot of my problems was that over responsibility, parentification, triangulation, all kinds of things was happening in my own eldest daughter. I'm the eldest daughter. I'm like, there's no one above me. There's just
Mhm.
me. But your experience to from also being the doted on child as a firstborn daughter, I was told the same thing.
Why did it stop?
Right, right, like pride and joy and all that good stuff. But then something shifts, something happens, something changes. And I think for me, it was when I turned 10 and I started my cycle. It was like I was pushed into another phase of life that my parents may or may not have been able to handle. But to hear your story and to see, not just, to hear so many other women's story as well, it's like the realization and I think also the grief
Mm.
that we go through when we recognize I was just a utility, I was a fixture. I was the problem solver and not a full-blown member of the family that was accepted just for being me, but for what I could do. So we're going to talk about all of that. But I also want to know, how did you get to the point where self-care became a part of that journey for you? And then we could talk a little bit more about the eldest daughter syndrome and the signs and symptoms and how others can actually get into the self-care and the healing that they need.
Yeah, so self-care is still an evolving thing for me. I feel like there's levels of
Mhm.
it. So the first thing I had to realize, so once I started working with a coach after my suicide attempt, he asked me a question because you said like this responsibility that we all have. I spoke to someone recently and she said like this responsibility that was put on us. And I had to stop her and I said, one of the things that was a turning point for me was realizing at 8 years old, I looked around at what was happening and I decided I need to do something. No one said to me, hey, I'm recruiting you to this role and you have no choice and you're under duress. It was hard to accept because I did feel like if my mum is my parent and she can see what I'm doing, she should stop me. But at the end of the day, it's still me that made the decision and continued into my adulthood. So, in order for me to shift, I had to realize that decision was leading me to break down. I needed to retrain other people in terms of how to deal with me. That was a turning point for me in terms of, okay, what are the decisions that I'm making that are draining me there's so much of the point that I don't want to live. Like it's not sustainable clearly.
Mhm.
And I started looking at like, how do I start setting boundaries? It's like saying no to me. I think I realized subconsciously when my role in the family is the problem solver, or is the one that bails everyone out, or is the one that provides for everyone. The fear is if I stop doing that, then who am I? I'm not going to be needed. And are they even going to love me? And so, even though it was killing me in a way, I was also scared about not playing that role. So
Mhm.
then I had to face that and start putting those boundaries in place and saying no. And I would stutter when I would say no. And then there would be backlash and I would have to deal with that. And I had to accept that as part of the transition period, just like weaning a baby off of milk. The baby's used to having the boob or having the bottle. And when you
Mhm.
start pulling it away from them, they're like, what are you doing? This is my comfort. And you've gotten me used to it. That was the point that I started realizing, like when I was able to see, I made the decision which led to dynamics and relationships that are not sustainable and don't work. So I need to make another decision to learn how to start filling my cup up so that I
Mhm.
can not fall into depression again.
Absolutely. And I was going to say earlier, you being 25, that was the age I had my first child. And I think that interrupted my process, interrupted the realization, the seeing. I guess people call it rebellious, but I removed myself from the household when I was 16. And because I knew that I was on a path of self-destruction or hurting someone else. So I left and I went to a boarding school. And I really have never been back home since. That enmeshment and codependency was still showing itself. Even though I moved out, I was still in close proximity. Even though I moved like 4 hours away, I was still taking on responsibility that I didn't really need to, but felt obligated to. Because again, who am I if I don't do that? What's my role? And finding it hard to redefine the role because I didn't have boundaries. I had a high professional self esteem, but I didn't have a very high relational self esteem. And so that really played a part. But learning those boundaries, going on this journey. And even though I went on my journey of healing and healing trauma, it still took a good 5 years before I recognized that this eldest daughter syndrome was driving a lot of things for me because you focus on the thing in your face. It was a bad relationship. So let me heal from that. But then it's like, okay, I kept going, well, what's the root? Why was I there? And coming to the realization that, you're really not who you thought you were in the family. This is really what was happening. And still being unable to find a different identity, to be able to be someone else and not even knowing who I wanted to be because that was all I knew.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I remember being confused when people would ask me, what are your hobbies? I was like, hobbies? What does that even mean? I don't have time for hobbies. I'm taking care of how many people? You don't have a sense of self. I didn't know what I liked to do. Self-care was not, or self full stop, was not even a factor. So yeah, I can relate.
How do you get out of that perpetual caretaking role? Because I'm taking care of not just myself, but To a degree, my kids still, because my son's on the spectrum, so I make appointments for him. My daughter, she's at a really critical point in her education, so I'm supporting her. I don't have any regrets or resentment about that, but then it's the other people. I've had to let go and say, you know what, I don't have any bandwidth or room for that, but still that habit is there to want to caretake and to want to fix issues and solve problems, so that perpetual caretaking role persists. And it's like, yeah, so now I'm going to about start my like 90-day rest and reset and recalibrate, where I'm just not doing anything for anyone but me. Even that feels hard and challenging, because it's like, am I going to really be able to do that? Do I really want to take that big of a step back and do nothing? But I know that for me to even get to another level of life satisfaction, that is the journey I have to take.
Yeah, I think the key thing in that, in terms of learning how to kind of figure out balance, is understanding and getting sensitive to what your intentions and motivators are with each time that you feel the urge to give. Because giving, when done from a full cup, is rewarding. It feels really good. And it is a skill that, even though it's like, yes, we can talk about the difficult things of being a firstborn daughter, but one of our gifts is that we know how to show up for people. So everyone that has a firstborn daughter in their life, I feel, is the luckiest person on earth, because if you want something done, we're going to do it. If you want someone that's loyal and dependable and all the things, firstborn daughters typically generally tick those boxes. But the drawback is that when we're not thinking about self-care and we're not checking in with ourselves that we have the capacity or resources or time to be able to show up, then we are given from a depleted place, which means that we need something to replenish. So then we start wanting appreciation, we start wanting reciprocity, because I give the analogy of a homeless person. If a homeless person lost $5 after making money on the street, they're going to really feel it, and they're going to be really stressed out about it. They don't know when they're going to eat. That $5 would have meant so much to them. Whereas if a millionaire lost $5, probably not even going to be a blip on their radar. So if we're not checking in on ourselves in terms of, are we coming from a really full place? When we give, then it's not taking anything from us, so therefore we don't need anything back. But if we start giving from a place of scarcity, like I'm stretched and I'm going to have to squeeze this in, or like I'm exhausted, I'm going to have to like really push myself to show up, then we start needing things. And because people can't show up the way we show up because they haven't had the same training based on the roles they've had in life, we start becoming resentful and feeling unappreciated. So I think that in terms of like creating something sustainable moving forward is really kind of grounding yourself on like, where am I coming from? Can I really give this, or am I doing this because I feel like I have to, or I want that person to like me, or I'm scared that person is going to leave me? There are those subconscious drivers, and if we can pull them to the front and be like, actually, no, I'm not going to do it because I can see that I'm doing it in order to try and manipulate an outcome or prevent something from happening. That's when there starts to be more balance.
Yes, that's so significant. It's so true. It's such a good way to reframe it. Filling your cup, doing the work gives you the capacity to fill your cup, because you recognize there is a cup. And then you're able to say, okay, what's it going to take for me? What does that look like for me to fill my cup? So what are some things that you recommend, or you have shared or trained your clients to, ways to fill their cup?
Oh, there's so many ways. I think it varies in different situations, but one of the things that is common amongst firstborn daughters is that they're always overwhelmed and they always have a to-do list that's spilling over. Every single time I ask them, is everything important? They say yes. I start running through the list and we find at least 40% of the things that are not important and are not urgent. But there's this I have to narrative. It just pours into motherhood, intimate relationships, friendships, work, instead of looking at what is my goal and what are the key things important to achieve those goals, and which things can wait for months or even years. Let me put those to the side, and when I have leisurely time and I want to look at them, let's do it. So it's firstly doing a life audit and what's keeping me busy, what's making me overwhelmed, and removing those things. But I think that needs to be done on a weekly basis, because space gets created and then it feels weird and not normal, and subconsciously things start getting piled up again. You have to train your mind to believe that you're not lazy if you're managing time and have spare time to go for a walk, listen to a podcast, read a book, or hang out with friends. So looking at the to-do list, what I find is that a lot of firstborn daughters have back pain. On a metaphysical level, you're nodding your head, you experience back pain.
Yes. Lower
So
back.
on a spiritual level, back pain is a sign of not being supported. And the hardest thing for firstborn daughters is to ask for and receive help. So it's like, on one hand, they're like, no one takes care of me, and why can't people show up for me the way that I show up for them? And then on the flip side, they're like, I'm used to having everything together and keeping up this image of having everything handled, and I feel awkward to ask for help, and I don't want to be rejected, or I don't want anyone to throw it in my face. So those kind of two sides conflict. Anyone that's going to thrive, whether you're trying to grow a business, whether you're trying to just be a balanced, calm, rested human being, you've got to learn to lean on others. That self-care, being able to share your challenges with people, be vulnerable and ask for help, and allow people to assist you and show up for you, so that you can create that ecosystem of support that allows you to breathe and look at things objectively and show up a lot more refreshed.
Thank you for sharing those strategies, those tips. I think having practical, here's what it looks like, kind of feedback information will make, I think, the journey much more manageable. I'm gonna say manageable. I think one of the main things a lot of eldest daughters contend with is not knowing how to cope, not having that modeled in front of them, and having to figure that out. What has been your experience with that? For me, I had to be very intentional about learning how to cope without falling into depression, falling into any kind of substance abuse, falling into, like negative coping mechanisms. What has been your experience, or what have you shared with your clients?
Well, I think my clients hire me to help them understand how they engage in the negative narratives of our mind. The depression was me focusing on all the things I didn't have and all the things people weren't doing. A lot of the work I had to do was look at, what am I responsible for? How am I contributing to this? What can I see that people are doing? What is the evidence I'm loved? By being able to redirect my focus to that, it was able to tip the scale from being so negative to not. I am a high advocate of getting professional help external from you, because we're so caught up in the story. It's so emotionally charged that it's hard to cope, which is why we numb, because we're just engaging it. We have 3,000 thoughts an hour, and 95% of them are subconscious. So it's hard by ourselves to see the ways that we are creating, staying in, or exacerbating our own pain. I would definitely say reaching out to work with a professional to help you work through some of those things. The other thing is reaching out to friends. Even though women are better than men at confiding in each other, I've realized that even now, what I've had to practice is communicating in a moment when something triggers me. Typically, what I used to do is a friend will do something, it will trigger me, I push it to the side, ignore it, but I'm compounding evidence to be pissed at them. It gets to a point where I'm just I want to cut them off, or I'm letting it out, but it's feeling bigger than it needs to be because of all of the unsaid stuff. So not only communicating hey, this is what I'm challenged with, and allowing someone to hold space, but also speaking my triggers and sharing my needs, and and that it's been met with a lot of love. And I think people have gone from seeing me as robotic to human and connecting with me, because I was this I never have any issues, I'm just monotone, emotions are not a thing, I'm not going to go there, because that's how I survive. It was there wasn't time for emotions, I had things to do. Allowing space for the emotions to come through and come out better than suppressing them. That killed my mum at the age of 52. too. She was also a firstborn daughter and she suppressed everything. She had high blood pressure and that high blood pressure attacked every organ until she had 9 heart attacks and killed her. I remember saying to her, I know nothing about your childhood and I feel like your body is telling you you've got to release. And she said to me, I'm scared that if I talk, I'm going to cry and not stop crying. And I'm like, you have pressure. So maybe the crying is going to release the pressure. And 2 weeks before she died, she said, okay, I'm ready. And it was too late. So I would encourage, if there's a fear of crying or being seen as weak or breaking down and not being able to pick yourself up, just trust that it's better out than in and find a safe space where you can do that. And
Sure. Now, that's so sad to hear about your mom. My dad is going through something similar, where the pressure is just building and building. And the body, let's say, keeps a score. It definitely comes out physically if you don't release it emotionally. I made a commitment to myself that I was going to take care of not just my body, but my emotions and making sure that I'm able to release and give myself permission to cry, to emote. I was driving home one night. I said, I haven't cried in a minute. Do I need to do that? And I've never done that before. Even in my journey of allowing the layers, because it's like layer upon layer that you are managing through the healing process. And I got to a layer where I literally, in the grieving process, allow myself to cry, not just for my story and my experience, but tears I didn't cry because I was so robotic, emotionless, emotionally constipated, suppressing things because I felt I needed to put on a brave face and not alarm other people because of my emotions. And I think even that, I don't know if that's a eldest daughter thing, but I feel like my emotions are too big for other people. So I just held back because I don't know what I'm going to do if I allow this to come to the surface, right? That's such a burden to bear.
huge. And it is a firstborn daughter thing. It's like we're so used to considering other people that we resist ourselves or we put ourselves on the back burner because we don't want to be a burden. Maybe everyone can't handle it because we don't have evidence of people being able to create space for us and hold us. So we have this inherent lack of trust of people, which is unfortunate because that lack of trust then has us choose employees, intimate partners who can't hold space because we will only attract what we believe. So it's a process of thinking that someone can't hold space and asking them anyway, giving them the choice and stepping into it despite the resistance. The surgery I had recently challenged me to do that. My friends were taking care of me. I don't have family. I would hear the issues they were dealing with and my automatic reaction is, oh my gosh, they've got so many things on their plate. I don't want to add to their plate. And I would just communicate, this is what's coming up for me. And they'd be like, don't be silly. I love to do this. You do so much. That would calm me down, not feeding into that narrative that people can't handle my emotions. Notice that it comes up for a reason because the conditioning created it and just kind of verbalize it and give people a choice and they always surprise you.
Yeah. And if I feel like as an eldest daughter, because so much was on your shoulders, the weight of it, the burden of it, how you felt in it contributes to holding back and not wanting to be a burden because you have multiple people burdening you. But your little self felt like all of those people would be that you've been carrying, you have to put that on someone else now. I'm glad you said that because I feel that has been my thought process over the years and the reason why I felt my burdens or my emotions were too big because the people who had compounded all of their emotions onto me, the responsibility I've been taking for their emotions, multiple people, not just my own, it was like if I share this with a friend, then I feel like my one thing is going to be too much, even though it probably isn't. It's a perception.
Yeah, it's really a loving thing, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I know how heavy this has
Hmm.
felt taking on other people's burdens. And I don't want to be the reason for anyone to feel this
Right.
discomfort or pain that I'm feeling.
Hmm.
So I don't want to share with them in order for them to feel it. The flip side is, especially if they're not firstborn daughters, there are people who are really good space holders that didn't have to play that role, that have all of the time and resources because they don't have the issues that we have setting boundaries. So they'll happily say, hey, I'm not available right now. I can make some time and we can have some hot chocolate and talk about it. It's light for them. Whereas for us, it's like, oh my gosh, I need to say no and I need to put a boundary. It's like so dramatic. So we're like doing a like for like, and it's not a like for like. There are people who have different experiences. And then the other thing is that I surround myself with, I have found that unconsciously, my closest friends have become firstborn daughters. So because they know what it's like, they know that there's a safe space. Just like you said earlier, when you speak to your family and you try to express to them what that burden feels like, they're like, oh, you're just exaggerating. When you tell a firstborn daughter, they're like, oh my gosh, I see you, I hear you, I get you. So it becomes a reciprocal exchange. It's not you putting anything on them because they finally get to be seen and heard and can also release. So now that there feels like there's a balanced exchange of sharing. So it's like, depends on who you're telling. If you can see that someone doesn't have the capacity to hold space for you, you're talking to them, they're not being present, that's not really the best person to choose to share, because then they're going to show up however they're showing up because that's how they are. And then you're going to personalize it like, see, look, I can't trust anyone. No, just be more intentional about who you share with.
Right. I think giving yourself the chance to bring it up to that person, even though they can't, or you see that they don't really have the capacity for it. So you're not still withholding, because that relationship could be for something completely different. It doesn't even have to be a space holder relationship. It could just be the person you go out to have fun with, whatever you decide it to be. So I think it's important, like you mentioned, to evaluate people in your life and see who can, who can't, and be okay with that. As an eldest daughter, we've talked a lot about, a lot of things, but like the symptoms of it. Some women are still maybe in denial. Some women may be like, I think, excuse me, pardon me, I don't really know. So like how would a woman know, this is what's happening to me, and you know, what are some first steps to start to move into this place of healing?
Unfortunately, I have found that most firstborn daughters need to crash before they're open to receiving something else. The reason being is that usually in their families, they're the ones that are always right. They're the ones that everyone comes to. They have it together. So even for me, my perception was like, I don't need help. They need help. They're the ones who don't know what they're doing. They're the ones who are blowing up their life. So when you're in that state where you're constantly externally focused on who you need to take care of, who you need to show up for, there's not much internal reflection happening. So it's usually like a health crisis or a mental crisis or a business crisis or something that happens that like is like, oh, I thought I had it figured out and I don't. Some that would be at that stage but are listening to this and they're like, I didn't realize that was an issue, but now that it's being spoken and I go through the same thing, I'm seeing it through different eyes. So sometimes it's just hearing what people go through that opens them up. And then others are just like defiant in, I'm okay, I don't have the problem, everyone else has a problem. If you're human, we all have issues. I think Kanye says something about we're all effed up. I'm just the first to admit it. Like we all are. So if you think that you're not and you don't have anything to heal or there's no growth to happen, that's unfortunate because you're robbing yourself of evolution and expansion, and that has a ripple effect in your career, relationships, and relationship to yourself. Typical traits are the ones that we've been focusing on in terms of self-sacrificial giving, where you give to the point where you have nothing, constantly in overwhelm because you feel you have to do things. You're living life in have-tos and shoulds, as most eldest daughters. This sense of being loyal and reliable to a fault where you don't have any boundaries. So you feel taken advantage of, you feel unappreciated, and that's because you kind of, it's hard to say people pleasing because a lot of firstborn daughters won't think of that. They're usually strong and they speak their mind and say what they want. But there is an element of people pleasing where it's like you take on more than you should because you don't want to say no. So that's people pleasing. The other thing is being perfectionist. So needing things to kind of be at a certain point in order for you to feel like you're good enough and everything around you is good enough. That's really unsustainable and it creates a lot of pressure. So what typically happens is that firstborn daughters are constantly judging themselves. So there's never any contentment in what is. And then on the flip side, because we can only give what we have, they're super judgmental. Even if people try to show up for them, they focus on what's not working because that's how they relate to themselves. One of the elements is being super judgmental, a little bit controlling. If you're a perfectionist and need things to be a certain way, you try to control everyone and everything to get certain outcomes, which again is like an impossible task because life is going to happen and we don't have control of how it unfolds. We have control over ourselves. Then all of these things culminate in this consistent state of stress and overwhelm. A lot of people may relate to firstborn daughters as being intense because their brains are constantly not only thinking about themselves and all the things they need to do for themselves and their career and to move things forward, but they're thinking about a whole bunch of other people and the things they're going through and the things they need to do for them. There's this intensity that comes across with that, which is not good for the health of a firstborn daughter and not sustainable. Hence why you're self-care alchemist.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, all those things on point. I have checked every one off because you feel like, and you've been given the responsibility of making sure everything works out flawlessly and coming to you from parents to siblings to cousins, uncles, everybody, all your friends come to you because you've, I guess, in a sense, proven that you're able to handle all the things that has been handed to you, presented to you, thrown on you voluntarily or voluntarily, so it's like because you've held it together, people assume, like you mentioned earlier, everything's okay. She doesn't need help. She can do it all by herself. I don't need to check in because she's not complaining. She's not cracking. She's not throwing a tantrum or whatever. And then, of course, there are some eldest sisters who do tell everybody off and curse them all out, but people still fall in line.
I was one of them, yeah. Still,
So,
still sounded like they felt like I was just being dramatic. But
right, right. But not seeing that was just a cry for help, support. Maybe you can do something. While I'm doing all 10 things, you can do one. But let's talk quickly about relationships, especially with parents, mothers, because I think the mother-daughter relationship dynamic can be very tenuous, volatile, even just depending on how the relationship is. But like oldest daughters and their mothers.
it's intense. So what I'm starting to see, and this is a point of exploration for me, and I don't think I've cracked the puzzle yet, but I'm trying to, because my thing is, why is this generational? Why is every firstborn daughter that I speak to, whether they're 12 or 70, saying that they have the same experience? And the reason I niched on firstborn daughters is because two of my clients asked for coaching on their dynamic with their firstborn daughter. I realized that they were unconsciously recreating things that they had healed with their mother. As I was looking at the coaching and what they were asking for, they both had this expectation of what they wanted their daughter to be. Because again, what we just talked about in terms of being perfectionist, that kind of pulls into when they have children. And I think what tends to happen is mothers, when they have their first girl, almost put the expectation unconsciously that that child is going to love them how they weren't loved by their mom. So that's a lot of responsibility for a child, because now it's like you need to fulfill this void, and therefore you need to show up in a certain way. And that's what then makes a lot of firstborn daughters feel like you don't accept me as I am. You need me to be something that you want me to be in order for you to be happy. So then it trains the firstborn daughter to try and earn love. And then they start neglecting themselves to try and fit into this mold that the mother wants. So I don't know whether this applies to every single firstborn daughter. It definitely applies to me. It applies to the women that I've worked with, and the more I speak, I'm seeing that there's this pattern, especially if your mum is a firstborn daughter. Because my mum would say things like, when I would say to her, why don't you care that I'm giving everything to you to the point like I've got nothing left and I want to take my life. And she, in another conversation, let something slip. I have suffered in this life and I deserve to enjoy too. And I was thinking, so she thinks that's my responsibility. I didn't ask to be born, but in her mind, of course you should take care of me. Like I've taken care of everyone else. That's not my business. I wasn't there, I wasn't one of those people. But I think it's that there's this void in her of like, I had to do all of these things. When do I get to enjoy? And seeing as my daughter is this capable woman, then why shouldn't she? Actually said to me, once I started working out of depression, I told her that I forgave her because I like who I've become and I wouldn't have become this person if I didn't play the role I played. And when I took the burden of apologizing, she then apologized and said, I was scared to nurture you as a mother because you were helping me so much. And I thought if I actually nurtured you like a mother, you would stop helping me. So I guess I saw you like a husband. And yeah, so it was kind of like, oh my God, I'm grateful for the honesty. And wow, like I didn't really have a mom because you saw me as your husband and you didn't want to mother me because you didn't want me to stop the work. So me feeling used was true, but I know she was going through a lot. So I think that there is this dynamic of projecting expectations of the love that they needed but they're not getting, that needs to come from the firstborn daughter, and also their projected expectation of what perfection looks like because you're an extension of them becomes this expectation that is placed on the firstborn daughter.
Wow, that's deep. That is really, really deep. Interestingly, both my parents lived, they're still together, but the dynamic with my mother was so interesting. It was almost like she saw me as maybe a husband as well. Her husband was there, but it's just like, why? Because she had okay, so there are four generations of firstborn daughters. So
Makes sense.
my daughter, of course, is a firstborn. I'm the firstborn. My mom's the firstborn. My grandmother's the firstborn. So, with that dynamic in place and the relationship my mom had with her mother was just fire and brimstone. It was crazy. My mom wanted a reprieve from the unrealistic expectations my grandmother placed on her and the responsibility she felt for her. My grandmother took up so much of my mother's energy by being her contentious and demanding self. There was nothing really left for her to give. I took a lot of responsibility. My dad was working all the time. I had a lot of resentment because I'm like, you actually have a husband. Why are you asking me to do all this stuff? Hearing my dad's complaints about things at home and my mother and my grandmother and all that stuff. So I was so busy trying to be the perfect substitute so that he could be happy. So that dynamic was just all screwed up. At the same time, me believing that he and I had a very special relationship, when I look back, I was like, yeah, we did. And he parentified me too. I was the substitute wife for him, and my mom I was substitute husband for her. So it was so crazy. It hit me like a ton of bricks because you think that because you're the oldest and you get everything done and people always call on you and you have this utility in their lives, that you're somehow special. But then when the realization hits, it's like because you're now completely depleted and you're now,
You are special to them.
well, yeah.
You are special to them. I think it's hard because it's painful that you were seen as this abundant, unfinished tap of love and resources. So then it feels like you're being used. Like I remember when I cut my family off, my mom went above and beyond to try and figure out where I lived. She would never say to me, like, I need you, I can't let it's like I didn't get, but I could see from that action that I was valuable. So I think it's like when you play that role, it can be easy to kind of focus on the being hard done by, which is a valuable and valid experience. And you played a part in your family where you were indispensable. Everyone came to you. So that's hard to deny that you were special. It's just you wanted to be special in another way.
Right.
And then you lived into a role that you ended up resenting. So it's like I've been on the other side of it, shifting my patterns and shifting how I've shown up. I've been able to connect with my family after the turbulence of the change in a different way. And I feel their love for me finally, right? I just wanted to give that perspective that you are loved. It's just not the way that you want to be loved.
I appreciate that. Reframing does help because I know that going no contact has had an intense effect on them. I know that choosing myself and my life and my space has had an effect. I know I am missed, and I know that is a form of love too. So while I'm working out how to have those conversations and how to express, here's how I want to be loved. I'm not willing to be a utility anymore. It's just me here, and we can figure out what that looks like, and it's okay.
I think it doesn't happen by a conversation. I think it happens by consistent actions that have changed on your side. Because in your new actions, you retrain them.
Ah, I see.
Because they start realizing, oh my gosh, she actually means no when she says no. She said no at least 15 times to me. It takes a while for them to be like, oh, this isn't a phase. This is for real. Asking them is a little bit difficult. They've had decades to create an expectation of you.
Right.
So that's going to be automatic and it's going to be unconscious. So when you go back in and you're like, hey, this is what I need, they're not meaning to default to old patterns. That's just what they've known. So when you show up differently and you're like, I love you, but no. I love you, but no. I'll come and hang out when I have some time, but I'm not doing that. You know, then they start realizing, oh, okay, well, this is a permanent thing and this needs to change. I think my sister told me for a year and a half after I re-engaged with my family, she didn't trust my change. And I don't blame her. It takes a long time to train people up. We need to give them some grace to acclimate to the new version of us.
Thank you for that mini coaching session. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah, but seriously, I think that does make sense. It's the actions that make the difference versus the words. And I think maybe that's the part where I've been kind of stuck. What am I supposed to say? I don't want to hurt their feelings. Or do I go in like a wrecking ball? So it's just all the different scenarios I've been playing when in fact it's like, well, what you're doing now is kind of the message. It's the action that you're taking now. And you don't really have to say or defend yourself. Because I think a lot of times the family want you to explain yourself. They want you to defend yourself in a sense. Well, for me in my family, they're like, well, why and why not? And why aren't you I've been getting a lot of gaslighting and manipulation. Well, we don't know how long we're going to be alive. Just those conversations. And it's just like, okay, this is not any different than before.
Can I share what I've seen with the firstborn daughters I work with when they start setting boundaries? They set boundaries from a place of trying to be convincing. So they're like, if I tell you why I need to set this boundary, I need you to understand it and agree with me, and then we can move on. Boundaries don't really get set like that. It's just kind of like, hey, this is my line. Why? Because it is, you know, because I don't have it to give and I want to be able to show up for you fully and I can't. Why? Z. You know, it's like I said, I don't need this. And they have to deal with what it brings up for them. They can say whatever, but then it's like managing your nervous system to not feel the pull, to like try to, oh gosh, I need to abandon what I need to do. That's the hard work, you know? So boundaries are not negotiations. And it's like being able to decipher between the two. A lot of my clients, when they start saying no, and I say, walk me through exactly what you say, I hear them trying to pitch and convince.
Mm.
And I'm like, that's not a boundary. You get clear on what works and what doesn't work for you and you share. Do you have people in your life where you ask them for things and they're like, I wish I could, but I can't? They don't, it's not a thing for them. It's a thing for us because it's so new. We've got to train ourselves to get to the point of like, oh, yes, I can do that. I've got some time. Or no, I can't. And it's not a thing. But that's on us to like engage in that we don't have to do anything. I think it goes back to the whole thing that we feel like the responsibility is put on us, but we take on the responsibility, so therefore we can take it off. So again, it's like them asking question doesn't mean that we have to explain and justify. We're choosing to explain and justify,
Right.
so we can choose something else.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for sharing some of the signs and symptoms and the reality that a lot of firstborn daughters aren't there. They don't recognize that there's a syndrome of problem because everyone else is the problem. And their resistance and walls are very high. So it does take a crash. For me, it took a crash. It took a, health crash. It took a emotional crash, relationship crash. It took a lot for me to finally get there and to see that something's wrong. This is not sustainable. This is not the life that you want, that you envision for yourself. So let's do some shifting and make some hard decisions. It was a hard decision to go no contact, recognizing that piece, but it's not going to kill you. I did grieve the family, I grieved the memories, everything, because I think I was taking responsibility. The old me was dying. And now I'm becoming a new person. I have to grieve the old life, the old expectations, and what never happened. That was tough.
But kudos for having the courage to do it, and maybe one day you can re-engage in contact when you have the capacity to not be pulled into old patterns.
I think the capacity is a thing. And I'm recognizing too that, like you mentioned before, it was decades of the same behavior and nervous system dysregulation. It's going to take some time. I have to remind myself that you don't have to rush in to any of it, but you can take your time because it took time to get here. It takes time to be at capacity and more overflowing so that my cup is full and I do have the space. Right now, I don't have it.
That's fair.
Yes, yes. So share more about your program, how you work with clients, where we can find you online.
The Healed Hero community is a community I launched this year. I'm on a mission to grow it to 100,000 women globally who are executives and entrepreneurs that are doing the work to heal these firstborn patterns so that they can achieve exponential success with no stress and heal their relationships. I have a free masterclass to give people more insight on the methodology. The Firstborn Daughters medicine to true transformation and healing is vulnerability, and there's 5 phases of that. So I run through those 5 phases and how they can be implemented into your life and career. I can be found on my website, which is www.healedhero.com. I can be found on LinkedIn, Adaku Mbagwu, Instagram, all the things. I'm on all the platforms, and I promise to show up more on those platforms, but I'm there.
Yes, at your own pace and leisure.
Yeah.
Thank you again. I appreciate you for being here, for sharing your wisdom, your story, and just for showing up for yourself. I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for that, but thank you for showing up for yourself and showing us how to do the same thing. I look forward to another conversation about this because I think it's going to be well received. Anyone in the audience who maybe an eldest daughter going through this, hope this episode has really given some insight and some tools that you can start to use to get to the place where it's not such a traumatic experience, but where you're now healed and whole.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me. I've enjoyed the conversation and look forward to more.
Thank you for listening to the Self Care Oasis podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Gregory. I look forward to seeing you in another episode. Until then, take care and choose your bliss.